The knife was already under my daughter's throat when I stepped onto the porch. Its cold edge angled just enough to force her chin up like she was being prepared for execution by two fake HOA officers who thought intimidation made them kings. Lily's back was pressed against the brick, her breath shaking out in small, panicked bursts as one of the counterfeit enforcers squeezed her arm hard enough to bruise while the other tightened his grip on the blade, whispering threats about forcing her out of a harmless school election. That was the moment the entire world narrowed into a tunnel, and every peaceful instinct I had forced into retirement was burned out of existence. They thought they were bullying a child. They didn't know they had just launched a home invasion stunt on the daughter of a Delta Force operator who had already stared down men far more dangerous than two HOA parasites in Halloween uniforms. My shadow fell across all three of them as I stepped forward, slow and controlled, dangerous enough to shift the air temperature. Before we move forward, drop a comment. Where are you watching from right now? Because once you hear the next 40 seconds, you'll understand exactly how deep into the HOA cult this neighborhood had fallen. Lily's eyes were wide, pleading, desperate. The knife holder didn't even notice me at first. He was too busy hissing that she would quit the election today or bleed for it. But the second man finally looked up, and the moment he recognized the calm in my stance, the controlled breathing, the readiness in my hands, he froze. The blade pressed tighter under Lily's chin for a split second, one tremor away from slicing her skin. And that was when the last thread of restraint inside me snapped in silence. But that's not even the half of it. The porch camera above us recorded everything with forensic clarity, every timestamp, every word, every tremble in Lily's voice, and I already knew that footage would bury whoever sent these wannabe cops to my home. I watched the knife angle upward just enough to cut off her breath again. The villain's voice dropped into a whisper meant to break her. Say you quit, now, or this gets messy. Lily shook her head, tears streaking down her cheeks, unable to form a full sentence. My jaw locked, my pulse slowed. That's when everything blew apart. The first fake officer finally noticed the way my stance shifted. Heels planted, shoulders angled, weight distributed evenly. The posture of someone who wasn't about to negotiate. He barked at me to back up because this is HOA enforcement. And for a moment the rage almost made me laugh. HOA enforcement. A phrase so stupid it barely registered as language when the man holding the knife couldn't even keep his grip consistent. I took one more step, deliberate and deadly quiet. Let her go. 3 words, flat enough to drain the noise from the street. The second man tried to posture, calling me an old man, telling me this was official business, but even he heard the hollow ring in his own voice. He knew. They both knew. They had pushed into territory no HOA bylaw could protect them from. My daughter cried out again as the knife shifted under her throat. That single sound flipped off the last switch in my mind that kept the war separate from my current life. The men didn't know what they triggered. They didn't know who they were standing in front of. They didn't know the difference between threatening a neighborhood dad and provoking someone trained to dismantle armed threats in the dark. The blade glinted once more. Lily's knees buckled. And I moved. The world snapped into one clean line of action. Wrist, elbow, leverage, impact. Years of muscle memory firing faster than thought. The moment my hand closed around the knife holder's wrist, he realized everything was over. His scream ripped through the porch as the blade clattered to the concrete. His partner lunged toward me in a sloppy, untrained swing, and I felt my body respond with automatic precision. A duck, an elbow, a foot sweep, the sound of bones cracking under the weight of his own fall. Lily stumbled behind me, sobbing but alive. I positioned myself between her and the men writhing on the ground, each one groaning under the consequences of their own stupidity. Phones began rising across the street. Neighbors gasped. Someone yelled Lily's name. And then the last person I wanted to see in that moment stormed into view. Karen, the tyrant, the clipboard queen, the HOA cult leader who believed the entire neighborhood was her personal territory. She marched toward us with a twisted smile that tried to hide the panic in her eyes. She pointed at me and shrieked, "You're going to jail! You attacked my officers!" My officers. That was her mistake. That was her signature. That was the confession she didn't mean to give. I stepped forward, breathing calm, voice steady enough to make her flinch. They held a knife to my daughter's throat, Karen. She opened her mouth to argue, but the neighbors were already recording. The fake cops were on the ground. The knife was glinting on the porch. And the truth was about to rip the entire HOA fantasy out of her hands. I didn't move into this neighborhood to start a war. I chose this place because it looked quiet, orderly, structured. Trees lined the sidewalks. Kids rode bikes without checking over their shoulders. And for the first time in years, I felt like Lily could grow up without ever touching the shadows I once lived in. I wanted normal mornings, normal dinners, normal life. But normal is the first thing HOA tyrants destroy when they smell weakness, and Karen, the self-appointed queen of this HOA cult, sensed something the moment she saw me unload the last moving box. A man who didn't worship her clipboard. She mistook my silence for submission. She mistook my calm for fear. She mistook my desire for peace as an invitation to crawl into every corner of our lives with the petty hunger of a power-drunk bored parasite. But that's not even the half of it. For months I let things slide, storing every violation, every forged warning, every harassment escalation in a folder I hoped I'd never have to use. I didn't want Lily to live with war in her backyard. I didn't want to become that man again. But the problem with trying to outrun your past is that sometimes the threat doesn't come from the shadows you left behind. It comes from a neighbor with a fake badge and a god complex. It started small, disguised as community standards enforcement. Grass 1 inch too tall, mailbox shade, not regulation silver. Trash can 3 inches from the curb instead of 5. Karen delivered these warnings like commandments from a throne she imagined she sat on. I always responded the same way. Calm, polite, uninterested in her power trip. That made things worse. HOA cult leaders don't hate resistance as much as they hate indifference. My refusal to give her fear turned her petty irritation into a target obsession. Here's where everything blew apart. When Lily announced she was running for student body president, the neighborhood lit up with support. She was kind, smart, steady. Teachers trusted her. Her friends admired her. She didn't chase popularity. She earned it. And that terrified Karen, because Karen's daughter Madison planned to run too. And in Karen's world, her daughter wasn't just a candidate, she was royalty, and the election was supposed to be her coronation. But early poll numbers told a different story. Lily was winning. Not by a little. By a landslide. That was the moment Karen snapped her fingers and activated the HOA mafia she had built around herself. It began with whispers, parents messaging each other that Lily might not have the emotional maturity for leadership. Kids repeating that her dad is weird, words that dripped directly from Karen's poisoned mouth. Lily brushed it off at first, but lies spread faster than truth when they come from someone with a manufactured crown. I saw the shift in Lily's shoulders, the quiet she didn't want me to notice, and I knew without asking that Karen was pushing harder than any school rivalry should justify. But that's not even the half of it. The intimidation tactics escalated. Unscheduled HOA inspections showed up on our door. Warning notes appeared at midnight. A violation notice arrived accusing Lily of having too many friends gathering at the house, as if teenage joy somehow threatened community stability. Karen even stood on the sidewalk one morning, arms folded, watching Lily walk to the bus stop like a surveillance creep waiting for a slip-up she could weaponize. I documented everything. Screenshots, photos, dates, times, patterns. HOA harassment isn't random, it's engineered. And Karen engineered every second of it. But the first real warning shot came 3 weeks before the election. I woke to an HOA inspection slip shoved under my door at 2:13 a.m., a time no legitimate board member should be awake, let alone trespassing on private property. The note wasn't signed, it wasn't official. And the wording, it wasn't about maintenance, it was a threat disguised as paperwork. Your daughter's actions may create unnecessary tension in the community. Adjust accordingly. That was the moment my instincts shifted. I wasn't dealing with an annoying neighbor. I wasn't dealing with HOA overreach. I was dealing with someone escalating toward a home invasion mindset. And once someone crosses into that territory, everything changes. That's when everything blew apart. The deeper I dug into the HOA machinery Karen controlled, the clearer it became that this neighborhood wasn't being governed. It was being occupied. She didn't run a board. She ran a cult, propped up by a treasurer who looked the other way, a vice president who signed anything placed in front of him, and a compliance committee made of neighbors too scared to challenge her authority. Every rule she issued, every violation she fabricated, every intimidation attempt she executed was built on the illusion that the HOA had more power than the law itself. But that's not even the half of it. The first real crack in her facade appeared the morning I reviewed the HOA bylaws after that 2:13 a.m. violation notice. I found 3 things immediately. The emergency access clause she used for her surprise inspections had never been approved. The fines she issued weren't documented in official minutes, and the enforcement forms she distributed didn't match the statewide HOA compliance templates. They were homemade, forged, printed in her living room. Every warning she had ever taped to my door was a counterfeit authority stamp created by a suburban tyrant who never grew past playground power fantasies. Emotional escalation tightened in my chest because the truth wasn't that Karen abused the rules. Karen was the rules in her own mind. She believed the HOA existed to serve her, defend her, praise her, and bend to her whims. And when the world didn't bend willingly, she tried to snap it. But here's where everything blew apart. The day after I discovered the forged paperwork, a neighbor approached me, quiet, nervous, glancing over his shoulder like he was confessing to a crime. He told me Karen had instructed him to monitor my property, that she gave him a clipboard and told him to record when I left the house, when I returned, when Lily walked to the bus, when friends visited, how long cars stayed in the driveway. She called it community oversight. I called it stalking. The villain behavior upgrade was undeniable. Karen wasn't content with petty violations. She had evolved from clipboard parasite to surveillance creep, logging my household's rhythms like she was preparing for a tactical breach. I asked him why he obeyed. He didn't hesitate. Because she said if I didn't, she'd have the board fine me for unauthorized modifications and force an exterior repaint. Fear made people loyal to her, not respect. Fear allowed her to weaponize the HOA into a home invasion ecosystem. Fear was the currency she traded in. But that wasn't the part that made my instincts flare. Later that night, around 11:30 p.m., I noticed a dark sedan cruising past my house, slowing each time it reached my driveway. No plates, no stickers, no headlights for the last 20 yards each time. The car repeated the loop 3 times within 10 minutes. When I stepped onto my porch, it sped off just fast enough to avoid confrontation. My gut tightened. That wasn't a bored teenager. That wasn't a lost driver. That was a dry run. That's not even the half of it. 2 days later, Lily came home shaken. She told me Madison confronted her at school and said, "You should drop out. It would be better for your dad." That wasn't a threat from a teenager. That was a threat written by a parent. A parent who had begun shifting her obsession from petty HOA dominance to targeted psychological warfare. I didn't show Lily my reaction. I didn't show anger. I showed calm. Because calm means control, and control is the one thing you never surrender in a war you didn't choose. But the escalation was undeniable. Karen now tracked my schedule, Lily's schedule, the location of our cameras, the blind spots in our yard. She even started commenting to other parents about veterans with unpredictable mental states. A statement designed to isolate us socially and paint me as a threat she could later justify neutralizing. That's when everything blew apart. The breaking point came on a Wednesday afternoon when I opened my door and found a man dressed in a cheap vest labeled HOA Enforcement, photographing the side of my house. No badge, no insignia, no legal reason to be there. He saw me and froze like a rookie caught mid-crime. I didn't speak. I didn't approach. I just watched him back away and sprint to the same dark sedan that had circled my home 2 nights earlier. In that moment, every instinct I'd worked years to bury came roaring to the surface. This wasn't harassment anymore. This wasn't neighborhood politics. This wasn't even about the election. This was prelude, preparation, pattern development. Karen wasn't annoyed with us. She was targeting us. She was building toward a strike. And I knew from experience that once someone crosses from surveillance into rehearsal, violence is next. She didn't know she was moving against someone trained to dismantle hostile operations before they happen. She didn't know the man she was pushing had already buried stronger enemies than her entire HOA mafia combined. She didn't know she was teaching me her patterns, her weaknesses, her blind desperation. And she didn't know that every step she took was bringing her closer to collapse. That's when everything blew apart. The night I upgraded the cameras, the house felt different, quieter, like it was holding its breath before a storm only I could sense coming. I hardwired every angle, synced the feeds to 3 different cloud backups, stored duplicates on encrypted drives, and built a chain of custody trails so tight not even a defense attorney could breathe through it. That's what real authority looks like. Not forged HOA letters, not counterfeit badges, not intimidation dressed as enforcement. Real authority lives in truth you can prove. And by the time I finished installing those cameras, I knew I was no longer documenting harassment. I was preparing for an attack. But that's not even the half of it. The first breakthrough came at 2:41 a.m., when motion detection triggered a clip on the backyard camera. I rewound the footage and saw a silhouette creeping along the fence line. A broad-shouldered man moving with the stiffness of someone who didn't understand shadows. He wasn't checking utilities or meters. He wasn't walking a dog. He was measuring the distance between the gate and the house, counting steps, plotting angles, testing how long it took to reach the porch without being seen from the street. A dry run, a rehearsal, a predator mapping his route. And then he made his first mistake. He stepped under the side floodlight for half a second, just long enough for the camera to catch the bold white lettering on his vest. HOA Enforcement, Counterfeit, Unauthorized, Illegal, printed on cheap nylon with a font you'd find on discount Halloween costumes. He didn't know I was watching. He didn't know every second of that footage would become evidence. But that wasn't the part that made my pulse slow into something sharp and cold. It was what happened next. Here's where everything blew apart. The next day, one of the quietest neighbors on the block, a man who usually avoided eye contact, approached me while taking out his trash. His voice shook. He looked over both shoulders before speaking. And then he told me Karen had approached him 2 weeks earlier with an offer. Report anything unusual about Damien's house. Use this clipboard. Log the times he leaves. Log the times his daughter gets home. Log anyone who visits. Don't ask why. She didn't offer payment. She offered protection. From fines, from penalties, from HOA retaliation. She recruited him the way criminals recruit desperate men, with fear. He showed me the clipboard. My address was written across the top in thick, confident marker. Under it were dates, times, and observations. Notes about Lily's schedule. Notes about my truck. Notes about lights turning on and off. Notes that didn't belong to him. Notes written in Karen's handwriting. I told him to go home, destroy the clipboard, and to never involve himself again. I didn't threaten him. I didn't need to. The fear in his eyes told me everything. Karen wasn't running an association. She was running surveillance. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was hunting. But that's not even the half of it. That afternoon, after Lily came home from school, I checked the front camera's archived clips and found something worse. 3 days before the knife incident, one of the fake officers, same vest, same boots, same sloppy gait, walked onto my porch when no one was home. He stood there for almost 2 minutes, testing the camera's angle, counting the steps to the door, studying the lock, peering through the small window beside the frame like he was inventorying my hallway. His posture wasn't curious, it was tactical. This wasn't harassment. This was preparation for a home invasion attempt disguised as HOA enforcement. And then came the moment I knew the attack wasn't spontaneous, it was commissioned. Karen gave orders. Karen coordinated schedules. Karen paid out of pocket. I knew that long before the police ever did. But the proof arrived on a silver platter that same evening. Here's where everything blew apart. Around 6 p.m., my phone buzzed with a voicemail from a detective. His voice was steady, but the underlying disgust was unmistakable. He said they had obtained a preliminary warrant to search Karen's vehicle due to neighbor statements and suspicious HOA authority documents. Inside her front console, they found a small notebook titled Election Strategy. I felt my jaw tighten even before he read the contents. Lily's name appeared 3 times, once circled, once underlined, once beside a scribbled instruction that made my hand curl into a fist. Pressure her, make her quit. Underneath that were bullet points with the names of the men who later tried to force Lily to withdraw. Payment schedules, drop-off locations, instructions to apply intimidation if necessary. And at the bottom of the page, written in a shameless scrawl, "Dad won't be a problem." She wrote those words with absolute confidence. She believed her HOA crown made her untouchable. She believed fear would protect her. She believed forged authority would work as armor. She didn't realize she had aimed her entire scheme at the wrong family. She didn't realize intimidation is useless against someone trained to dismantle hostile operations with controlled precision. She didn't realize she had already lost the moment she put my daughter's name in that notebook. But that's not even the half of it. When detectives met me the next morning, their expressions changed the moment I handed them the video of the fake officer's dry run. Their professionalism cracked for a second, replaced by a very human fury. The lead detective said, "This isn't HOA misconduct, this is organized intimidation." And he was right. The case shifted instantly. From harassment to conspiracy, from violations to felonies, from neighborhood politics to state-level prosecution. Here's where everything blew apart. One detective asked me a question. "Do you have anything else?" I nodded once and pulled a second flash drive from my pocket. A drive containing every fabricated violation, every forged notice, every late-night inspection, every time-stamped clip of unmarked cars creeping near my house, every account from neighbors coerced into spying, every interaction where Karen weaponized the HOA against us. Their eyes widened as they scrolled through the files. I saw recognition hit them like a slow-moving detonation. They weren't looking at scattered incidents. They were looking at a pattern, a structure, a network, a woman who believed she could command an entire neighborhood like a private army. A tyrant, unaware she had just declared war on the wrong man. By the time they left my driveway, they had everything they needed. And by the time the sun set, Karen's fate was sealed. The morning the police arrived, the entire neighborhood felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something it couldn't name but absolutely sensed. Squad cars rolled into the cul-de-sac with their lights off, moving slow, deliberate, purposeful. Officers stepped out with the kind of posture that tells everyone watching that whatever is about to happen isn't a conversation. It's a reckoning. I stood on my porch with Lily behind me, her hand gripping the back of my shirt, still trembling from the memory of the knife under her throat. The two fake enforcers Karen hired were still sprawled on my lawn in matching agony from the consequences of their own cowardice. Neighbors lined the sidewalks, phones up, recording everything, whispering questions they were too afraid to speak aloud. But that's not even the half of it. Karen came storming down the street the moment she saw the officers, marching like a clipboard tyrant who believed she could still control the narrative. Her voice cut through the air, sharp and unhinged, as she jabbed her finger toward me and screamed, "Arrest him! Arrest him now! He assaulted HOA officers during a compliance check." Officers didn't even look at her. They went straight to me, calm but alert, and asked to see my porch camera footage. I didn't lecture. I didn't defend myself. I didn't waste a single breath. I simply nodded, stepped aside, and let them inside. That's the difference between real authority and forged authority. One doesn't flinch, one doesn't tremble, one doesn't scream, one just shows the truth. That's where everything blew apart. Inside, I pulled up the footage. The moment the officers saw Lily being slammed against the wall, the knife angling under her chin, the men threatening her life over a school election, their faces hardened. One officer muttered a quiet curse. Another clenched his jaw so tight it clicked. And by the time the video ended, they weren't looking at me like a suspect. They were looking at me like a father who had acted exactly as any trained protector would when confronted with a home invasion threat disguised as HOA enforcement. We stepped outside. And that was the moment Karen realized the world was no longer bending toward her delusion. She sprinted toward the officers again, her voice shrill enough to make neighbors recoil. "Don't listen to him. The video is taken out of context. They were performing an HOA investigation." The lead officer turned to her with the slow, cold precision of someone about to end a lie permanently. "Ma'am," he said, "HOA inspections do not involve knives." The crowd erupted into gasps. Karen's face drained of color, but that's not even the half of it. The officer crouched beside one of the groaning fake enforcers and ripped open the front of his vest, flipping it inside out. Everyone watching saw it instantly. No badge, no authorization, no tracking number, no official emblem. Just blank nylon. "This is counterfeit gear," the officer announced loudly. And that was when the first fake officer broke. He whimpered, clutching his broken shoulder, and lifted a trembling finger toward Karen. "She hired us," he gasped. "She told us to scare the girl into quitting the election. She said she'd pay extra if the dad never found out." The neighborhood exploded. Gasps, shouts, phones zooming in. Someone yelled, "What the hell, Karen?" She shook her head like a malfunctioning robot, stumbling backward as the second fake officer added his confession, voice cracking. "She forged HOA documents. She paid us cash every week. She told us it was legal." Karen snapped. She lunged toward them, screaming, "Liars! You're all lying!" Neighbors recoiled. The officer stepped between her and the men. The lead cop spoke with finality. "Karen Whitmore, turn around. Hands behind your back." And that's where everything truly blew apart. Karen shrieked like a collapsing siren, kicking, flailing, screaming phrases no one could even understand anymore. "I am the HOA," she howled. "I make the rules." But the rules weren't listening. The rules were arresting her. Officers cuffed her wrists and walked her past the crowd she once ruled through fear. Not one neighbor stepped forward to help her. Not one person defended her. Not one person even pretended she was worth saving. The humiliation was total, but that's not even the half of it. While she was being loaded into the cruiser, The HOA board arrived, shaken, pale, visibly terrified. It looked at the fake uniforms, the confessions, the footage, the chaos, the police, and they realized they had enabled a tyrant who turned the HOA into a weapon. People whispered. Someone muttered, "How did we not see this?" Someone else answered, "We did. We were just too scared to admit it." The board president approached the officers, voice trembling, and said, "We didn't authorize any of this. She acted alone." The officer shut that down instantly. "Then your lack of oversight allowed this to happen." Public collapse, complete exposure, full dismantling of her false empire. It didn't stop there. The moment Karen was shoved into the back seat, she screamed at me with the last shred of delusion she had left. "This isn't over!" I stepped forward, calm, steady, voice low enough to freeze her mid-scream. "Karen, it was over the second you put a knife near my daughter." The door slammed. The cruiser rolled forward. Her empire, built on fear, forged authority, and HOA theatrics, collapsed in the same instant the sirens began to wail. But that's not even the half of it. Neighbors turned toward me, eyes wide, processing everything they had just watched. Some apologized. Some looked ashamed. Some looked relieved. And all of them saw the truth. Karen wasn't just petty. She wasn't just entitled. She wasn't just power drunk. She was dangerous. And she had finally been stopped. Here's where everything blew apart. Karen's arrest didn't end the war. It only cleared the battlefield. What came next wasn't chaos. It was precision. The kind of precision I lived on for years. The kind Karen never expected because she believed the HOA crown she forged in her living room made her untouchable. She thought fear was a shield. She thought authority could be printed on office paper. She thought neighbors would stay silent forever. She didn't understand that once you escalate into a home invasion attempt, the person you targeted stops reacting and starts dismantling. And that's exactly what I did. But that's not even the half of it. 2 days after the arrest, I sat across from a 3-person prosecutorial team in a windowless office downtown. They weren't HOA volunteers. They weren't neighbors with opinions. They were state-level prosecutors who had seen everything from fraud to manslaughter. And even they were stunned by the scale of what Karen orchestrated. When I opened the folder containing every forged violation, every midnight inspection notice, every counterfeit HOA memo, every dry-run video clip, and every time-stamped threat, the room shifted. Their posture straightened, their tone sharpened, their expressions cooled. I watched the realization settle on them. This wasn't harassment. It was a coordinated intimidation operation disguised as HOA enforcement. The authority beat landed when they brought in specialists, a digital forensics analyst to authenticate every second of video, a handwriting expert to compare Karen's forged signatures to legitimate HOA documents, and a financial investigator to follow the cash trail she thought was invisible. Each expert dismantled a piece of her defense. One proved the camera metadata was airtight. Another proved her official HOA documents came from her home printer, not the HOA office. Another traced cash withdrawals lining up with the payment schedule she wrote in her notebook, the one she must have believed would never be found. But that wasn't the half of it. The real demolition began when one of the fake officers regained enough consciousness in the hospital to speak to detectives. His statement didn't just add clarity, it detonated the case open. He admitted Karen coached them on what to say. He admitted she forged identification. He admitted she told them Lily just needs a scare. He admitted she said, her dad won't fight back. I felt something cold roll through me when detectives read that line aloud. Karen truly believed intimidation could overcome training. She truly believed fear was stronger than discipline. She truly believed she could push a Delta Force veteran into submission the same way she pushed neighbors into painting fences and trimming lawns. But that's not even the half of it. The second fake officer flipped harder than the first. He asked for a deal. He offered names, dates, screenshots, messages. He turned over the location where Karen gave them cash payments. He told investigators she rehearsed lines with them. Lines meant to sound like official HOA laws, lines meant to mimic legal authority she never had. One thing stuck with me. He said she practiced the phrase, "We are HOA enforcement, cooperate or face penalties," in a mirror, again and again, like she was rehearsing a performance she thought the world would accept. She didn't understand the difference between authority and costume. She never did. Here's where everything blew apart. The prosecutor called me 3 days later with a tone I recognized from battlefield commanders right before they delivered the final briefing. "We're moving forward with maximum charges," he said. "Her behavior meets the threshold for conspiracy, impersonation, falsified authority, child endangerment, and assault with a deadly weapon." Maximum charges, maximum sentencing, maximum humiliation. They weren't just going after Karen. They were going after every system she abused. The HOA board was subpoenaed. Meeting minutes were seized, emails were pulled, phones were collected. Every person who once backed her out of fear was now forced to testify under oath. Without her intimidation holding them hostage, they spilled everything. They confirmed she ruled the HOA like a dictator. They confirmed she forged signatures. They confirmed she issued penalties without approval. They confirmed she used HOA funds to fuel her side agenda. The villain behavior upgrade broke the roof off her entire empire. Karen didn't just misuse power, she was addicted to it. She built her identity on it. And now she had to watch it being peeled away layer by rotten layer. But that's not even the half of it. The HOA itself was placed under emergency oversight. A state compliance auditor reviewed every policy, every infraction, every dollar spent. The discovery was catastrophic. Unauthorized surveillance equipment, missing funds, false citations, illegal penalties. Dozens of homeowners were refunded thousands. Karen's legacy wasn't fear anymore, it was embarrassment. The neighborhood she once controlled now looked at her like a cursed name they never wanted to speak again. And I hadn't even stepped into the courtroom yet. That's where everything blew apart. On the final day before trial, the prosecutor met with me to review the witness list. It was thick. Officers, neighbors, experts, analysts. The two hired enforcers. The HOA vice president who had finally grown a spine. And me? I thought they would want me angry. They didn't. They wanted me steady. They wanted me calm. They wanted me exactly the way I stood on that porch the night the knife touched my daughter's skin. Controlled dominance. Because nothing destroys a tyrant faster than the silence of someone who isn't afraid of them. The prosecutor leaned forward and said, "When you testify, just tell the truth. Truth is the weapon that ends her." I nodded once. I didn't need weapons. I had evidence. I had my daughter safe. I had a neighborhood awake. And for the first time since moving into this place, I had clarity. Karen wasn't powerful. She was a fraud with a clipboard and a god complex. And now the world would see her without the costume. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere. Heavy with the quiet dread of a community finally confronting the monster it allowed to grow. Karen sat at the defense table, with her wrists resting on the polished wood, hands trembling, eyes darting around the room like she was searching for the power she once wielded effortlessly. But there was nothing left for her to command. No HOA cult, no clipboard to point, no terrified neighbors to bully into silence. Just a judge, a prosecutor, a jury, and the truth. Stripped, exposed, undeniable. But that's not even the half of it. When the prosecutor began laying out the charges, the courtroom shifted. Count 1, conspiracy to commit intimidation. Count 2, impersonation of an officer. Count 3, falsifying HOA authority documents. Count 4, child endangerment. Count 5, assault with a deadly weapon. Count 6, solicitation of violence. Each charge hit like a hammer blow against the delusion she had wrapped herself in for years. And then they played the footage. Lily pinned against the wall, the knife under her throat, the threats, the fake uniforms, the trembling breath. The moment I stepped forward with the kind of calm that only comes from training, meant to neutralize real threats, not suburban clowns with counterfeit gear. Karen's face crumpled as the jury leaned forward, every second of that recording carving away her remaining defenses. Her attorney tried interrupting, objecting, arguing context, distortion, anything to dull the impact, but the judge silenced him. The evidence speaks for itself. And it did. It roasted every lie she had rehearsed. Here's where everything blew apart. When the notebook entered evidence, the one detectives found in her car titled "Election Strategy," Karen broke. The prosecutor read each note aloud: names, times, payment schedules, instructions to pressure the girl, instructions to act with authority to intimidate. And the final line she wrote in a selfish, arrogant scrawl: "Dad won't be a problem." Her shoulders collapsed inward, her face drained. She shook her head slowly like she was hearing her own handwriting for the first time. The courtroom was silent, except for the scratching of pens across juror notebooks. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. Watching a tyrant confront the truth is never a dramatic explosion. It's a quiet implosion. A slow disintegration of ego until nothing remains but a hollow outline of the person they pretended to be. But that's not even the half of it. The hired enforcers testified next. Both men, arm slings visible, eyes lowered, legs shaking, confessed to everything. They described how Karen paid them in cash, coached them to threaten Lily, and told them to use force if necessary. They admitted she convinced them the HOA had authority beyond the law, authority powerful enough to justify terrorizing a minor. The jury's reaction was unmistakable: disgust, anger, disbelief. Then came the HOA board. The vice president broke first, admitting Karen manipulated minutes, forged signatures, and issued unauthorized penalties. The treasurer followed, revealing mismanaged funds and panic in his voice as he said, "We were scared of her too." The board president confessed last, confirming Karen used the HOA as a weapon, not a governance body. Every word tore another layer from her collapsing throne, and the jury watched her unravel. Here's where everything blew apart. When it was my turn to testify, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't posture. I didn't show rage. I just told the truth. How the trespassing violation began with forged paperwork. How harassment escalated into stalking. How surveillance turned into targeted planning. How Karen weaponized fear like it was currency. How 2 fake officers pressed a knife to my daughter's throat in the name of enforcement. How I reacted not as a soldier, but as a father who refused to let a parasite harm his child. The courtroom didn't need theatrics. It needed clarity. And clarity is something I've always delivered with precision. After my testimony, the prosecutor said 8 words that sealed everything. This was not HOA business. This was attempted terror. Karen put her hands over her face. She didn't cry. She hid. She finally understood the size of the monster she had become. But that's not even the half of it. The judge delivered the sentence with a voice carved from stone. 28 years in state prison for the combined charges. Immediate removal from any HOA role, locally or statewide, for life. Full restitution to every homeowner she manipulated. Mandatory psychiatric evaluation. Permanent restraining orders protecting Lily and me from any attempted contact. When the bailiff approached her, she didn't fight. She didn't scream. She didn't command. She simply wilted. Neighbors watched her shuffle toward the side door, wrists bound, head lowered. Not one person reached for her. Not one person spoke her name. Not one person met her eyes. Her reign was over. Her fear was gone. Her kingdom was ash. Here's where everything blew apart. When Lily and I stepped outside, the neighborhood was silent in a way it hadn't been since the day we moved in. Not tense, not fearful, just relieved. People nodded to me with cautious respect, but no one approached. They didn't need to. They finally understood what Karen never did. Peace is not passive. Peace is enforced by those who refuse to let danger grow roots. I put my hand on Lily's shoulder and felt her finally breathe like the weight on her chest had been lifted. The sky looked clearer. The air tasted cleaner. And for the first time in months, the neighborhood felt like a home, not a battleground. We reached our porch. I looked across the yard where the fake officers had once held my daughter hostage. I looked at the street where Karen screamed her last delusional orders. And I felt the moment settle deep inside me. The war was over. The fear was gone. And the neighborhood had reclaimed its silence. The power trip ended instantly.